I met Helen at the community center one Tuesday afternoon. It was one of those late autumn days when the air smells like coffee and old newspapers. Everything felt slow, like the world was exhaling before winter. I was there for my usual volunteer hours, helping seniors sign up for health workshops. Nothing fancy, just paperwork, smiles, and the occasional story someone needed to tell. Helen walked in wearing a lavender scarf and a look that said she wasn't sure why she was there. Her hair was silver, tied back neatly, her eyes bright but quiet, the kind of quiet that hides behind polite smiles. She came up to the desk, looked around at the flyers, and said softly, "Is this where they teach the dance classes?" I looked up, surprised. She didn't seem the class type. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings, ballroom, waltz, even a little swing if you're feeling brave." She smiled faintly. "I'm not brave, but I'd like to try." And that's how I met Helen, 71 years old, widow, retired librarian, and soon to be the most graceful beginner dancer I'd ever seen. She told me about her husband Carl over coffee a week later. They'd been married 48 years. He'd been an electrician, quiet man, loved crossword puzzles, and hated dancing. She laughed when she said that, not bitterly, but like she was remembering something tender. "He always said," she told me, "dancing is just fancy walking with music. Why should I pay to embarrass myself?" "So you never danced?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not once, not even at our wedding. He stepped on my foot during the rehearsal and refused to try again." She looked out the window then, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "When he died, I realized how much silence he'd left behind. Not just in the house, in me. So I thought, maybe it's time I learn what it feels like to move again." Her first class was awkward. The music was too loud, her shoes too new, and her steps too hesitant. But she laughed, a little shaky, a little unsure, but genuine. I watched from the back of the room as the instructor, Maria, taught them how to count the steps. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Most of the seniors looked stiff, but Helen, she was trying like it mattered. At the end of the class, her cheeks were flushed, her scarf slightly crooked, but her smile was young. When I asked how it went, she said, "Terrible, but it felt wonderful." A few weeks later, Helen started staying after class. She'd practice by herself, shoes tapping lightly on the wooden floor, while the janitor swept near the door. Sometimes she'd hum along with the music, half under her breath, eyes closed. It was like watching someone remember a language they never knew they spoke. I noticed she started dressing differently too. Softer colors, earrings, even a little lipstick. Once, she joked, "I figure if I'm going to fall, I might as well look good doing it." She wasn't falling anymore, though. She was floating. Around the third month, the center hosted a small dance night. Nothing big, just an informal gathering for students to practice what they'd learned. Helen almost didn't come. She told me, "I don't want to look foolish in front of people." I said, "You've been practicing too hard to sit this one out." That evening, she arrived in a navy blue dress, hair pinned neatly, pearls around her neck. The band started with something slow. Moon River, I think, and I saw her standing near the wall, hands clasped nervously. Then one of the older gentlemen, Harold, asked her to dance. She hesitated, but then she took his hand. It was clumsy at first, steps mismatched, her timing off. But soon she found the rhythm. Her eyes lifted, her back straightened, and her smile began to glow. In that moment, something shifted in the room. People weren't watching an old woman dance. They were watching someone come back to life. After that night, Helen didn't miss a single class. She'd come early, stretch, help others with their steps, even bring cookies for everyone. One day, she said, "I can't believe I waited 70 years to learn this." Dancing isn't just about movement. It's about remembering that you still belong in the world. She told me something that stayed with me. After Carl died, she said, everyone kept telling me to keep busy. They meant well, but grief doesn't need noise. It needs rhythm. It needs something that reminds you your heart can still keep time. One afternoon, I walked into the studio and found her dancing alone. No music, just the sound of her feet brushing the floor. I watched for a moment. It was graceful, deliberate, and peaceful. When she noticed me, she stopped, a little embarrassed. "Oh, you caught me talking to Carl again," she said. "Talking to him?" I asked. She smiled gently. "Every time I dance, I imagine he's watching. I tell him, 'Look, I finally learned, old man.'" She laughed softly, then added, "He'd probably still refuse to join me." We both smiled. There was something sacred in that. Love that didn't vanish, only changed its form. The spring recital came around. It wasn't a big deal, just an afternoon performance for families and friends. But for Helen, it was something monumental. She was chosen to dance a short waltz with Harold. Before going on stage, she held my hand and said, "I'm nervous. My hands are shaking." I told her, "That's not fear, Helen. That's life reminding you you're still in it." When the music started, she stepped onto the floor. The lights were soft, the audience silent. And then, with the first notes of Blue Skies, she began to move. Not perfectly, not gracefully by professional standards, but beautifully in her own way. Every step seemed to say, "I'm still here. I still feel. I still matter." When it ended, there was a hush, then applause, long and genuine. Helen bowed, eyes shimmering, a hand over her heart. Later she told me, "I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt like I was thanking life for not giving up on me." Over the months, her confidence grew. She started helping new students, especially widows, who'd lost their partners and didn't know how to fill the evenings. She'd say, "Start with one step. That's how everything begins again." She even began teaching a small Saturday morning group called Second Steps. Most of them were between 65 and 80. They didn't just dance. They talked, they laughed, they became family. I once asked her, "Do you ever think Carl would have joined you if you were still here?" She thought for a while, smiling. "No," she said. "He'd have sat in the back, grinning, pretending he wasn't proud. That was his way." Then one day, something happened that made me realize how deeply she'd changed. After class, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a faded photograph. Her and Carl on their wedding day. "Keep it," she said. "I want someone to remember us both, not as who we were, but as who I became because of him." I didn't understand at first. Then she said quietly, "Losing him didn't end my story. It just changed the dance." Months later, at the annual community gala, Helen performed a solo. She called it "The Empty Chair." In the center of the stage sat a simple wooden chair, symbolic, she said, of all the people who once held our hands and taught us how to love. She danced around it, slow, soft, full of grace. At one point, she placed her hand on the chair's back, smiled, and whispered something no one else could hear. When the music ended, she bowed, tears streaming freely. And so did half the audience. It wasn't sadness, it was recognition. That love, real love, doesn't fade. It transforms. It teaches us that even when life takes away the partner, it leaves the rhythm behind. Helen still comes to the center. Now she teaches 3 classes a week, all volunteer. Her students adore her, not because she's the best dancer, but because she makes them believe in motion again. Sometimes she tells newcomers, "Grief makes your heart heavy. Dancing makes it light enough to carry." Every time I see her glide across the floor, I think of that first day, the hesitant woman with the lavender scarf who asked where the dance classes were. And now, here she is, 73, graceful, radiant, alive. She told me recently, "When I die, I don't want a funeral with flowers and speeches. I want music. I want someone to play the song I danced to that night. And maybe, just maybe, someone will take a step or two in my honor." She laughed. "I think Carl would like that." And I realized she wasn't just dancing for herself anymore. She was dancing for every heart that had forgotten how to move after loss. Sometimes, after class, she sits by the window, watching the sunset over the parking lot. Once, I asked what she was thinking about. She said softly, "Nothing much, just wondering if heaven has a dance floor." Then she smiled, that same tender, knowing smile she had on the first day. And she whispered, almost to herself, "If it does, I hope Carl's saving me the next dance."